Nvidia will have Wall Street holding its breath this week until the company reports their earnings after the bell on Wednesday. On today's show, we'll go through the different expectations as it relates to Nvidia. We'll take a look at the revenue trend, also the guidance that they gave us in the previous quarterly earnings. We'll measure that and compare that based on the expectations, because that is what's going to send Nvidia stock either higher or lower this week, is how they come in, not only in the most recent quarter, but the expectations and the guidance for the future quarters. We'll talk about how those revenue estimates have continued to move higher. This dates back to something that I actually sent to our free newsletter subscribers last year. This was like back in October. We talked about the revenue estimates and how wide they were back in October. They continue to be wide, but they continue to move towards the high-end estimates for Nvidia. I'll talk about and give you my insight into, do I think these can continue to move higher as we start to see the first shipments of Blackwell start to move off the production lines from the server makers like HP and Supermicro. Now, we also have an atmosphere and a culture out here in Silicon Valley that if you can create something and it can rocket up into popularity, you're going to get a lot of venture capitalists just throwing money at you. And we've seen just over the past 30 days, you had DeepSeek basically going from nothing to one of the top downloaded apps in the App Store. Grok has done the exact same thing this week. So we're seeing companies that didn't really exist a year ago all of a sudden become number one in their category in the App Store. That's super exciting, and that is likely going to continue to spur tons of investment into the AI space. And because there's kind of a lack of news flow this week, and we're only going to be talking about Nvidia, I'll run through most of the semiconductor sector from a technical perspective. A lot of these stocks started to pull back later in the week, and we'll talk about where they stand technically, and you can make your decision if you want to step in front of these things before Wednesday when Nvidia reports, or if you decide to wait. What is going on, investors? Hopefully, guys are doing well out there. This is the Semiconductor Show here on Equity Empire. We join you every weekend where we talk about the semiconductor industry. These videos are for top 1% investors. So if you're joining us, congratulations, and I'm glad you're here. Now, Nvidia over the past year have gone up 99%. And the question on everybody's mind is, can this stock continue to outperform? I don't think anybody's sitting here really expecting 99% growth over the next year with Nvidia. It's certainly possible, be very difficult. It's certainly possible, but what we want as investors is for this to continue to outperform. If the S&P 500 is up 20%, if the QQQ is up 28%, we're going to want Nvidia to come over that. And the way the company is going to come over that is to beat expectations from a revenue perspective. They gave us Q4 guidance when they announced their Q3 earnings late last year. The guidance called for $37.5 billion plus or minus 2%. I busted out my calculator and it said $36.75 billion on the low end, 38.25 on the high end. Wall Street has centered themselves around revenue estimates between 37.5, which is essentially the guidance that Nvidia gave you for the Q4, and the high-end estimate is for $42 billion. When you look at the midpoint of that, it gives you about a $38 billion number. So that's the bar that Wall Street has set for Nvidia. It's very similar to like an athlete. The bar for a top-end athlete like Patrick Mahomes is to win the Super Bowl. When he goes to the Super Bowl and he loses a little bit of luster, even though he's still one of the greatest quarterbacks of all time. The exact same bar is being set for Nvidia. They have to hit this $38 billion number. If they don't, there's going to be a lot of questions on the conference call. If they don't hit it, it'll all rely on the Q1 guidance as well. And I would say that is the number that we're all looking at when Nvidia reports their earnings just a couple of days from now. The Wall Street estimate right now is for $42 billion. The high end is closer to $47 billion. Any number close to $47 billion. any number with a 5 in front of it, 50 billion, this stock would make a dramatic leg higher. Here's what I'm expecting as an investor and kind of an observer of Nvidia. We've talked about this numerous times on our newsletter, the fact that you have these really wide revenue estimates, particularly as you get out into calendar year 2025, the spring, summer, fall time. They were very, very wide. They continue to be wide. We'll talk about that here in a minute, but let's focus on this Q1 guidance because, again, for Nvidia shares to make a new leg higher and bust up over the 52-week high of $153 per share, the stock has to put up Q1 guidance meaningfully above $42 billion. The second thing that could potentially happen is on the conference call. Jensen Huang gets on the conference call and he starts talking up the Q2, Q3, Q4, essentially the back half of this year. The reason why he might get on the conference call and talk up the back half of this year is actually what we've been hearing from several companies this week or this past couple of weeks. HP, which is a server maker, shipped its very first Blackwell-based AI computing systems. This was back on the 13th. So this is not revenue that is actually going to show up on the Q4 report. It is likely going to be baked into the Q1 guidance. Also, Supermicro Computer gave us an update on their business as well. They don't expect Blackwell to deliver revenue boost until mid-2025. So probably not even the upcoming Q1 will you see a lot of benefit from Supermicro ramping up their production. That won't come until the Q2 and Q3 for Nvidia. And so how will investors digest this? This is going to be key for Nvidia. The things to watch for when the company reports their earnings on Wednesday is, first of all, you need the Q1 to be good enough. $40 billion would be absolutely spectacular. The company puts that up, you're very, very confident. Also, the Q1 estimate, anything in this $42 billion probably won't meaningfully shoot the stock higher, but the stock should hold that level. Anything with a 5 in front of it, and it'll rocket up higher. It'll be all about the conference call. And so if you have the stones to trade this thing before the conference call, props to you. I probably will just wait until listen to the conference call and see what Jensen Huang says about HP shipping its first Blackwell-based system in the most recent quarter. Supermicro not ramping up Blackwell production until mid-2025. And so the company won't give you specific guidance for the Q2, Q3, Q4 later this year, but depending on their tone, depending on how much they hype it up, we'll get investors excited about these future quarters. Because when we look out into those quarters, we're talking about the spring, fall, winter time here in the United States in terms of seasons, but it's really calendar year Q2, Q3, Q4, you still have a wide discrepancy based on the low and the high end estimates expected by Wall Street. Just looking all the way out into the Q4, $47 billion is the low end estimate. The high end is for $78 billion. That is a $30 billion spread. That's basically almost what the company is doing on a quarterly basis. These are still really wide. And so for Nvidia stock to outperform, it needs to not only meet the expectations, that's a bare minimum, but it actually needs to come towards the high-end estimates. And I believe just based on the CapEx spending numbers that we've gotten from Wall Street, from Google going from $52.5 billion in spend last year up to $75, Microsoft going from $53 billion last year up to $80 billion, Meta, who does not lease out their excess capacity. When you're looking at Google, you're looking at Microsoft, you're looking at Amazon, they're spending on CapEx not only for their internal uses, but they're also obviously leasing some of this space out to cloud, startup, and other companies. Meta doesn't actually do that. So the fact that they're going from $37 billion up to as high as $65 billion is very impressive because this is all for their own internal use. And then when you look at Amazon, there's a little bit of warehouse spend mixed into their CapEx, but they're going to go from $83 billion up to $100 billion of CapEx spend. So this all has me to believe that Nvidia is more likely, much more likely, to come towards the high-end estimate, not at the high-end estimate, but certainly above the midpoint expectations, which are close to $50 billion for the last couple of quarters in this calendar year. My estimations is that Nvidia will continue to come towards those higher-end expectations. That was my expectations dating back to October of last year. That continues to be my prediction. And the other reason why I'm continuing to predict that is AI applications are only getting more and more popular. You look at Grok, it was released Grok 3 this week to a lot of fanfare, and it rocketed to the top free app on the App Store. Just a couple of weeks ago, it was DeepSeek taking the top spot as well. And so these things are rocketing up in popularity. It reminds me back all the way back to the dawn of the internet. A website would come out and all of a sudden it would rocket up to one of the most popular websites. A social media account would get launched, or a social media site would get launched, or dating back all the way to 2007 when the iPhone came out and a video game or some kind of new application would come out and all of a sudden it would rocket it up to the top of the charts. We're seeing that again. So when you see this type of thing, it spurs more investment, not less, because obviously billions of dollars can be made if you can not only rocket it to the top of the chart, but if you can stay there. If Grok can stay at the top of the chart, well, now that company is going to hold its valuation, raise money at an even higher valuation, and continue to move up in influence as it relates to technology. And again, you've got a bunch of companies behind a lot of this stuff, and we don't even have Elon Musk and his spending here. You've got billionaires behind these types of things and trillion-dollar companies. So I believe, and I still believe, that Nvidia is more likely to come towards the high-end estimates as it relates to their revenue guidance. And it all relates to the fact that AI is still in its infancy and still starting to take off. Now, let's move over to the technical segment. The SOXX has been in consolidating. It's been consolidating sideways. Really minutia on the technical perspective. We broke out of this uptrend that we were in since 2022. We broke out. That's usually not a good sign. And we back tested to the bottom of the channel. Usually not a good sign. Now, with really strong Nvidia earnings, you could pop back into this channel and this is just a blip on the radar. Otherwise, you're actually looking for this trend here. I'll delete it to just give you the effect of that. This trend is almost over. We'll find out, I think, this week if that trend is over. Also, in the micro trend, you're making a high, lower high, lower high. It's basically been confirmed with a lower series of highs. Now, some people will point out that this is kind of a flagging formation. I don't trade the flag formations. There are some people and the traders, some of them that I follow, they trade these types of formations. I don't find a lot of success trading these, but some people do. I like to trade kind of longer term trends. And speaking of that, with the SOXX, it's actually this purple line. So we're still way over and above this. So if this one does dump out the bottom, you're approaching kind of a longer term trend. Could be an area of buying opportunities. But again, it all hinges on Nvidia's earnings later this week. The SMH is in a slightly different space because I believe still the concentration of this one is TSM, Broadcom, and Nvidia, and all those stocks continue to hold their highs. This one's looking particularly good. This one also kind of forming, again, what you would consider kind of a flag formation. Now, I know enough about these flag formations to know that this is basically setting up for a break higher or lower. This is one of the reasons why I don't trade these formations, is because they're not super definitive on which way they're going to break. This one could break higher, could break lower. And as a trader, you're already kind of at a guessing game in these formations, at least for me. Again, some of you guys out there might prefer these types of setups. It's not something that I like, but we're looking for a break one way or another there. Now, the stock of the week is obviously Nvidia. We are on a weekly view here. We are still making a series in the micro trend. You're making a series of higher highs. Hasn't really been confirmed by a new higher high. So you're making higher lows, not really confirmed with a higher high, but that could come this week. There is overhead resistance at the 52-week high on this one in the 150s. You break above 150, it's anybody's guess where this one can go. This one could go, depending on the guidance and the conference call, this one could go up into the 170s this week. It could literally get up that high depending on what the conference call says. If it gets rejected here and you break these lows back here that you kind of the deep seek lows back at 114, there's areas at 92 and down at 77. Those are the areas we're looking at. I know it seems like a long ways away, but that's the move this stock has made. We've got two different longer term trends that we're playing with. One is here. I don't even know if that's really the trend, but the longer term trend is way down here with Nvidia. Now, we might be very old. We might be old men and women by the time we get to that point, right? This trend keeps going. The price action of Nvidia keeps going. Eventually, those will converge. If they converge in the shorter term, your entire stock portfolio will get obliterated. So that would be a bad thing. But we'll see with Nvidia this week. Technically, it still looks really, really good, actually. Now, AMD has pulled into a green box. When I have a green box on a stock chart, it is time to buy. You can recycle back and go back to old videos. I don't typically move these green box. I put them in and I leave them there. When they're at the top of the green box, it means if you have $10 in your Robinhood account, you would buy $1. If you want 10 shares of AMD, you would buy one of them. As you move in deeper into the green box, you move further and further into the stock. This one should find some support down here at about 96. This one will probably also move in sympathy with Nvidia this week. Broadcom is setting up. It is just kind of like consolidating up there. Interesting enough about Broadcom is they actually report their earnings even later than Nvidia. We won't hear from Broadcom for another week or so. They report Thursday, March 6th. That will be a big day in the market as well. Intel continues to find overhead resistance at 25-ish, but it's finding support down here at 18-19. So you can trade kind of the in-between moves with Intel if you feel like it. Qualcomm is still above a range where I'd be excited about that. You obviously had the iPhone release this week, or a newer version of an iPhone release this week with a different modem chip. Qualcomm has that priced in and has done a decent job kind of telegraphing that with investors. And so the loss of the Apple business is kind of priced into Qualcomm already. It's not really new news that Apple has been going their own way there. And so as Qualcomm continues to make its way down, anywhere south of 140 on that one gets kind of interesting. TSM is just confirmed a new higher high. It's looking absolutely fantastic. Dips in that one should be bought. ASML is actually in a buying zone underneath the channel, underneath the middle of the channel, can be bought. I bought this one a few weeks ago in the $600 range. NXP, we set a trade alert out with NXP. If you don't pay close enough attention to the channel, eventually I'll have this over on kind of the paid newsletter side. We sent out a trade alert with NXP. I can't exactly remember when it was. It was like I traded this one, so I was in this one with you guys as well. This one made a rocket from like the low 200s up to the 250s. It did retreat a little bit this week, but that one performed very nicely off of that trade. ARM Holding is in a buying area. This one actually looks really good. In fact, it's approaching the bottom of the channel. This one might actually get its own video, depending on what happens with Nvidia later this week. I've been getting trolled relentlessly here on YouTube. When Super Micro Computer was, at the time, it was split adjusted. It was $700. Now it was like a $75 stock. When the stock was $75, I said it was $15 trash. And almost instantly, Super Micro, over the past couple of weeks, or just in a matter of weeks, went all the way down to about $17 per share. Now, it has rebounded very, very nicely. In fact, this downtrend that is in has basically been canceled out. It hit overhead resistance at the previous support level. Technically, this one has been playing out absolutely perfectly. Until you make a new higher high up over $100, you're not out of that downtrend, at least in the shorter term. But the uptrend still looks good. You've got a long-term trend converging down here. But the point I want to make is, when this was $75, I said it was $15 trash. It went to 17. If I did that at a hedge fund, guys, I would have at least a 7-figure bonus. At a larger hedge fund, I would have gotten an 8-figure bonus, and I probably would have gotten moved up to partner. On YouTube, I get relentlessly trolled, and that's the kind of thing I can handle because I'm a big boy. And congrats, if you can buy a stock without an audited set of financials, props to you. But my process requires audited set of financials, and if you don't have a process to invest, you're probably just guessing out there. And I guarantee you the results you've seen with Supermicro, you're not going to be able to repeat them because you don't have a process. Now, moving over to Dell. This one, I mean, you're painting two different stories with this one. Micro trend, high, lower high. That could potentially be another lower high. You get earnings with this one actually next week as well. So that'll be very interesting, although that'll likely move with Nvidia as well. Now, but you're also getting kind of this, again, these pennants, these flag formations. These are not things I'm super excited about because it's anybody's guess which way they break. If the long-term trend stays intact with Dell, it'll break to the upside just like the rest of these stocks. Micron has been consolidating very tightly. Micron's a memory maker, if you weren't familiar with that. Looks like the base on this one is down here at 87, but the lid is about 110, 112 on this one. It's just consolidating in that range until you get a break higher or lower. You're not really sure which way that one is going to go. Lam Research found some really nice support right here at 68 bucks. It was resistance back here, resistance here. It's now serving as support. Looks like it wants to make potentially a new higher high up here at about a 118. And finally, Applied Materials is actually in a buying zone. It's not like a great one, but it is there. You're below the middle of the channel. You're still in an uptrend, higher highs, higher lows. Looks pretty good. As this one continues to move lower, we'll alert you if it gets in an even better buying opportunity. Hopefully you guys enjoyed today's video. That was the Semiconductor Show for Sunday, February 23rd. Enjoy the Nvidia earnings on Wednesday. Those will be back over on the main channel. I'll post those earnings over there. We'll recap them also on Friday on the Fang Stock Recap Show, talk about any of the type of fallout. And then again, we'll be back next week here on Equity Empire to talk about all the stuff that has happened since the company reports their earnings on Wednesday. Hopefully you guys enjoyed today's video. We'll be back again next week. Good luck with your investments.